Let's go. Hey everyone, and if you're from Uzbekistan, then salam, and welcome to Understandable English. This video is again part of my informal travel series, where I talk about my trips and travels, and I do this in a very relaxed and easy to understand way. This way, you can learn about the world while also learning English. Today, I'm going to tell you about part 2 of my trip to Uzbekistan, which was just one leg or part of my trip through Central Asia last year. In this part, I will tell you about my experiences in Samarkand, in Bukhara, and in Khiva. If you're interested to hear more about Tashkent and the Ferghana Valley, then you can check out part 1 of this series in Uzbekistan. I already posted that one. But let's start with Samarkand. We got to Samarkand by train, and it wasn't a slow overnight train, but it was a wonderful high-speed train, something that I really wasn't expecting to see in Uzbekistan. It was wonderful, easy, smooth, quiet, and cheap. Everything you could want in public transport. Now, right off the bat, or from the beginning, from the start, you can tell that Samarkand was built and ready for tourism. This is much different than what I saw in the Ferghana Valley. But we still did most of the things that all the tourists do. Walk around the center, enjoy the architecture. There is just so much to see, so many old things. And the thing that of course stands out the most, or the most interesting thing to see, are these ceramic tiles everywhere. Now, some people might complain that they are a little bit run down or broken, but in my opinion, I think that that makes it better. It makes it more authentic. It gives it a historical vibe. If it's too perfect, well, maybe they just built it this year or last year. But when there are some pieces missing, some broken pieces, it really gives it a historical vibe. You can feel what it might have been like to be there many, many years ago when it was built. We were in Uzbekistan in the summer, and it was hot, so hot. And so as we were walking around the city, it was a difficult time, especially in the midday. We were feeling sluggish. This means that you don't really want to move because you're too hot and tired. But even with the heat, we still managed to do a lot and have a lot of fun. Every step you took and everywhere you looked, there were these madrasas, which are like schools, old Islamic schools, and they had mosques as well, and these things were decorated in such cool ways. It was interesting to explore every nook and cranny, that is, every little piece of these things, to go into the different rooms and explore, and imagine what the students might have been thinking or feeling when they were sitting there studying. One thing both I and my parents noticed in Uzbekistan were that the restaurants and the hotels were decorated in a crazy way, almost over-decorated. One might even say gaudy, which means that it's meant to look rich even though it's not rich. Sometimes I thought it was a little bit silly, but it still gave this kind of Central Asian vibe to all the places we were at. Another interesting piece and newer part of Samarkand was called the Forever City. One of the locals recommended that we explore it. And since we had a few extra hours to kill, that is hours to spend, before our train to Bukhara, we decided to check it out. And it was quite interesting. More or less, they built all the important tourist pieces on a small scale in a little tiny village or city on the outskirts or the outside of Samarkand. And it was mostly empty because it was still very new, but we went there and walked around, and it was a very strange but interesting place to be. We had some tea and bread, relaxed on a chapchan, and there was even a live band who started to play for us. After a few hours, the sun went down, which means it was less hot and more people came. Suddenly, there was a huge dance party and we were having a good time. But after this dance party, we hopped on our train and sped off to Bukhara. Bukhara was a bit more calm than Samarkand, but it still had the very touristic feel. If you asked a question or didn't know about something, people were happy to spend 5, 10 minutes, 30 minutes explaining and making you feel welcome. There was one guy I remember who was ready to share about his generations and generations of Persian rug making that him and his family had done. He was ready to talk for hours, and it was super interesting. Also, as a language lover like I am, it was interesting in Bukhara to hear the dialect of Persian that Persians in the city speak. Of course, in Uzbekistan, most people speak Uzbek, but in some small places, there are pockets or small places of people who speak Persian, or in this case, the Bukhara Persian. After Bukhara, we went to Khiva, which was an overnight train ride away. And this train was not the fancy new train that we had been on earlier. This was a hot and dirty and humid train, and it was a long night. But we survived and we made it to Khiva. This city was quite interesting. It's much smaller than the other cities, and most of the old and interesting tourist places are inside the very center, inside this type of wall. Probably the most recognizable part is this fat blue tower. But as I walked around, I really liked how it made me feel like I was in Star Wars. One of those old cities in Star Wars, there was these brown buildings and these domes. It was interesting, and I really liked that vibe of Khiva. Here, I really liked our hotel. It was more like a homestay. That is, you stay in a home of someone else, and it was wonderful. The decorations were very interesting, and they cooked us local food, and it was a wonderful time and a way to experience the Uzbek culture and hospitality and food all at the same time. But after a few days in Khiva, we hopped on the hot, sweaty overnight train back to Tashkent, and I picked up my passport from the US Embassy, and it was time to go to our next stop, Tajikistan. To sum up my experience in Uzbekistan, I would say that the Central Asian hospitality, or the way they accept guests, was wonderful and something that I had never seen anywhere in the world before this. The only thing I could possibly complain about were the taxi drivers, but I think that's the same everywhere. I would love to come back to Uzbekistan, perhaps in a different season so it wasn't so hot. But that's the end of part 2. If you know someone from Uzbekistan, then feel free to share this with them. Perhaps they will find it interesting. If you learn something new, feel free to press like or subscribe so that you can continue learning English in fun, interesting, and relaxing ways. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Toodles!